Hey guys, take a look at this anime here. After working hard to get some sales for the company he works for, our protagonist finally manages to close a contract and is very happy about it. But while he's on his way back, he forgets that he's near a river and takes a bullet to the chest. And so he goes down and receives a second chance from the gods. Different from other ice guy, he decides not to have any fighting power, he just wants to be a healer and avoid fighting monster. And that's the story we'll see today. Without further ado, let's go to the recap. The anime starts by showing our protagonist very frustrated, as he went from company to company and never managed to close a contract. Until finally, at the end of the day, he succeeds. Very happy, he celebrates saying that he would finally get the promotion he had always dreamed of. But meanwhile, a thief manages to get hold of a police officer's gun and is chased by him. The police officer throws himself on the thief, and the guy fires the gun. And guess where the stray bullet hits? Exactly, right in our unlucky protagonist's chest. He really has no luck. His vision darkens, and he goes down, but suddenly, a light shines, and he realizes he's in another place. A voice speaks to him and says that he is destined to a world with land and sea, just like Earth. However, in this new world, there is magic, monsters. And finally, he is reincarnated, already 15 years old, with new clothes and appearance. As soon as he wakes up, he sees a giant dragon flying over the place where he was and is very astonished. He tells us that the name of this new world is Galdardia. The voice speaks to him again and says it will grant him basic knowledge of that world, and tells him to open his status. So he does, and soon a display appears with some information, like name, profession, age, and level. In the name and profession fields, nothing is specified yet, and God tells him to choose his name and profession in that world. He decides that his name will be Lucio, and he chose the profession of healer. And in abilities, he chose proficiency analysis, martial arts, magic control, and last but not least, the luck monster skill, which, as the name says, gives him incredible luck. Remember this information, you'll see how important it will be shortly. He also has some coins, and that's IT. Lucio then decides to go to the nearest city to try to get a job. He arrives soon and is impressed by the size of the city wall. He notices that the people entering show some kind of identification. Seeing this, he gets nervous, as he doesn't have anything like that to show. Nevertheless, he goes, and he tries to convince the guard using his sales skills from his previous life. I hope he doesn't get shot again, or better yet, stabbed. He says he has no identification and explains that he was raised in a small village, and when he became an adult, he became a healer. He says his village has no use for him, so he was kicked out. The guard tells him to wait and soon comes back with a blonde woman. She asks if he is the healer looking for a job in the city. Lucio, still shocked by her beauty, confirms that yes, it's him. She tells him to follow her and says she'll take him to the Healers Guild. Before leaving, he thanks the guard for helping him and sees that the woman is already ahead. He runs to catch up with her, and on the way, he bumps into some adventurers. They get angry and ask where he's in such a hurry to go. Lucio responds that he's going to the Healers Guild. And when he says that, the guy gets really angry, as healers are not well regarded in that world for some reason. The adventurer says that if he becomes corrupt like the others, he will deal with him. Lucio tells him not to worry, as he will do his best. And then they leave. They move forward, and Lucio is surprised by the city. And after a while, they finally arrive at the Healers Guild. Lucio thanks her for bringing him there and thinks to himself that her smile is beautiful, and going down was a blessing. Then he registers as a healer. The guild attendant tells him to fill out a form, and at first, Lucio can't read anything written on it. But suddenly, translations appear, and he can understand everything that's written. He fills out the form as requested. After finishing, he hands it to the attendant, who tells him to wait a little. While she's gone, he talks to Lumina, that blonde girl who brought him to the guild. He asks her the name of that city. And at that moment, she realizes that he really knows nothing. She says that this is Maritone City, the largest and most famous city in the kingdom of Shurul. Then the girl comes back and tells him to channel his magic into a small card. He does as she asks, and Lucio hands the card again to the girl so that she can register his card in the healer's system. She returns and says that she has confirmed that he is a healer and has affinity for sacred magic. At this moment, Lumina says that her work here is done, and she will leave. But, before she goes, Lucio calls her and says that he has never used sacred magic, so he doesn't know if he can do it. Then they agree that Lucio will stay in the guild for a while to learn how to use healing abilities. Having said that, Lumina offers him 3 options to learn. Spartan training. 2. Take a loan, kind of like a student loan, you know. And 3. Become an apprentice. Oh, I forgot the fourth option, which is you guys hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. I personally think this is the best one. Subscribe here. She explains that in Spartan training, he will study a lot until he learns healing spells, repeating the spells until he runs out of magic, and when he recovers his mana, he does it all over again. In the second option, he will take a loan and go to a regular magic school but will be in debt up to his eyeballs after it's over. And the third option, he will perform tasks like cleaning for a year, and in his free time, he can study magic. After explaining to Lucille, Lumina tells him to choose one of the options. He starts thinking and says that as an apprentice, he probably won't have much time to study, and in the case of financing, he will end up owing a lot of money and will have to work hard to pay it off. With these options, he sees no alternative but to choose Spartan training, and so he does. He tells her that he will take the Spartan training. He communicates this to Lumina, who is very surprised because no one chooses this option as it is very exhausting and demanding. The attendant hears this and thinks he must really be stupid. After that, Lumina leaves, and Lucille is under the care of Kururu, the guild attendant. And yes, you didn't hear it wrong, her name is really Kururu, but it's with a K, not that green frog though. She calls Lucille and says that she will show him his room. He thanks Lumina and follows Kururu. When they arrive at his room, he notices that it has no windows and is quite simple. Soon Lucille finds a magic book and starts reading to learn the basics. He says he has 10 days to complete his training, so he doesn't waste any time and starts studying right away. After reading a bit, he decides to put into practice everything he's read. He tries to visualize a wound healing and recites the healing incantation for the first time. However, on his first try, only a little magic fart comes out. He realizes that he will have to train a lot to get good, and he checks his status and sees that with this simple attempt, his healer's status improved. Lucille sees that with the mana he has, he can try 9 more times before his MP is completely drained. However, he feels terrible every time his mana runs out and decides not to let that happen. He decides that every time it's his last spell before running out of mana, he will stop and study until his mana recovers. This way, he won't feel bad and will optimize his time. The next day, he wakes up and sees that this reincarnation thing wasn't just a dream, and this will be his new life for real. So he is motivated to have a completely different life from his failed one before. After a while following his training and study plan, he sees that his healer status has improved significantly. And at this moment, someone knocks on the door. Lucille tells them to come in, and he is faced with a beautiful girl, who leaves him astonished. She says that she brought his breakfast, and he thanks her. Lucille asks for her name, and she says it's Monica and adds that it's a pleasure to meet him. Now it's the third day, and Lucille finally manages to cast the healing spell. He goes to the reception to tell Monica about it and asks her who Lumina is, that blonde girl who brought him to the guild. Monica says that she is the leader of the female paladin regiment of the church and that she is a really important person. Lucille thinks to himself that meeting that girl was truly a blessing. He decides to look for some job where he can practice his healer abilities. While he is walking, he runs into those adventurers he bumped into at the beginning, remember? But this time, he is much friendlier than before. And while they are talking, several other adventurers arrive badly injured, and they are desperate because they can't afford a clinic. They charge exorbitant prices. Lucille, seeing the situation, doesn't know what to do, but he sets aside his nervousness and says that he will heal those adventurers, shocking everyone there. Today's video starts with Lucille having a flashback of Monica talking about the corruption that infests all the healers' clinics in the city. He realizes it will be impossible to take the injured adventurers to a clinic since they are in a very critical state, and time is running out. Lucille sees no alternative and decides he will heal the injured adventurers himself. The first one is a girl, go figure. He attempts to heal her but fails on his first try. Then he focuses and makes a new attempt, this time successfully healing them one by one, until he reaches the last adventurer. But Lucille is already exhausted, and even before reaching the wounded adventurer, he collapses from fatigue. Before losing consciousness, Lucille sees the last wounded adventurer and thinks to himself that he failed. He should have saved them all. Later, Lucille recovers and starts to reflect on what happened. He feels sad for not being able to help the last adventurer and believes that with more training, this wouldn't have happened. Lucille makes a decision and declares that he will join the Adventurers Guild to level up and gain experience. He arrives at the guild and goes to the reception, where he is impressed and immediately speaks with the receptionist. Lucille quickly asks to register as an adventurer. As he looks at the receptionist's ears, he is very happy and calls her beautiful. The rabbit girl hands Lucille a form to fill out with his information. He does as she asks, and she confirms that everything is in order, and he has everything required to become an adventurer. She then explains how everything works to him, and now he is finally an adventurer. At some point, he asks if the guild accepts healing requests, and the girl is startled by his question. He introduces himself again and mentions that he is a healer. He asks if he can use his healing on the injured adventurers to gain experience as a healer, which surprises the girl as no one has made such a request before. Lucille also asks if someone there can teach him martial arts, and in exchange, he can heal all the injured adventurers. The rabbit girl calls another person to help decide whether this is possible or not. After a while, a huge guy appears alongside her, and Lucille introduces himself and explains his objectives. The guy becomes a bit defensive and says that it's a strange request coming from a healer. He seems suspicious, given the healer's bad reputation in the city. He asks Lucille why he wants to learn to fight, and Lucille simply responds that he doesn't want to be useless on the battlefield and mentions that even a weak monster could defeat him if he went on a journey right now. The guy reluctantly agrees to Lucille's proposal and says that he will pay him 1 silver coin a day. He asks Lucille when he will start. Lucille says that he can begin in 6 days, which is when his training at the Healers Guild ends. So it's decided. He uses the remaining time at the Healers Guild to train his magic as much as possible. After the 10 days of training are over, he bids farewell to the girls at the Healers Guild and heads to the Adventurers Guild. Upon arrival, he meets another girl at the reception and introduces himself. He finds her beautiful and mentions that all the girls in that world are beautiful. Then she guides him to go down the stairs to the underground training room. Down there, he meets Broad, who is happy and thought he would back out and give up. Lucille says he would never give up, he needs skills to survive. Soon, Broad begins the intense training, and Lucille starts running until he can't anymore. Literally until he can't anymore. Then Broad asks him to try to attack him. Lucille attempts to kick, but it's so weak that Broad easily stops him. Broad decides that he has a lot of training ahead to improve. The first day of training ends, and Lucille is completely exhausted. Broad tells Lucille that not many novices join them because they start with little money and quickly have to go on adventures to earn money. Many of them leave before actually becoming real adventurers. Then some badly wounded adventurers appear and ask if Lucille would really heal them for free. They don't believe it much, as clinics charge exorbitant prices, and few can afford treatment. Lucille quickly rushes to the injured girl and starts to heal her. After finishing the healing, the girl is very happy and thanks him profusely for curing her. Lucille asks if anyone else is injured and continues to heal them all. Broad then says he sees that Lucille really has the determination to continue the training, and says that if that's the case, he should live there in the guild to facilitate his training. Lucille gets scared and says he doesn't have money. Broad then says it's not a problem, as it will be free of charge. And besides, he will get 3 meals a day totally for free. Broad says he shouldn't be formal because he's only doing this so that he can increase the survival rate of beginner adventurers. And so it's decided. And right afterwards, Broad says he will prohibit him from leaving until his training is complete. Lucille gets worried and remembers everything he will go through. Lucille tries to negotiate, and asks if he can finish his training in 1 month. Broad smiles, and accepts, but says that he will have to train more than usual, if he wants to finish everything in a month. After that, Lucille goes to take a shower and then Broad gives him new clothes to wear. Then Manila, that rabbit girl, arrives and says that she will be in charge of washing his clothes. And Lucille feels embarrassed, and says that he wouldn't want to trouble her with that, and he would wash his clothes himself. By saying that, he makes the girl very sad, since she saw that you still haven't left a like on this video. Give it a like to make her happy. But after she gets sad, she makes a cute face and Lucille can't resist, and he finally agrees. He thanks her and says that one day he will repay her. Later, Lucille goes to the dining room and finds a table full of food just for him. At first, he thinks it's a lot, but after he starts eating and realizes that it's incredibly delicious, he eats non-stop until everything is devoured. He thanks for the food, and right afterwards, Broad takes him to where his room will be during the period of his training. Lucille lies down and goes to sleep, but he sees that it's still early and gets up to continue training his magic. The next day, Broad wakes him up early, and calls him to have breakfast in the dining room. Broad introduces Gulga to Lucille. He's the cook and bartender in the dining room. Gulgar says that nothing beats his food, and then shows a drink that looks kind of suspicious to Lucille. He says that the drink is disgusting, but if he really wants to evolve, he must drink the whole cup of that suspicious liquid. Well, I wouldn't drink that in any way. Tell me in the comments if you would dare. I bet you wouldn't either. Gulgar says that the liquid greatly increases his strength, endurance, and magic. The only problem is its horrible taste and smell. And he says that's why no one else wants to drink it to get strong. Lucille really wants to get strong as soon as possible, and he sees no alternatives, so the big guy chugs the cup, and quickly drinks all the liquid in it, thus surprising everyone who witnessed it. After drinking it, he feels very energetic and gets really excited for his training. Then he quickly eats his breakfast meat, and goes on to his training with Broad. Lucille trains hard every day. Broad doesn't go easy on him and keeps hammering the boy in training without mercy. But Lucille bravely resists and keeps training until he can't go any further. At some point, another girl appears and asks if there's someone there who is healing people for free. Lucille confirms and goes to her to ask if she is hurt. The girl confirms and shows her back. She says she was injured by a half-human half-rat. Lucille says he can heal the bites and stop the bleeding, but he can't cure any disease the rat might have passed on to her. She agrees, and he starts casting the healing spell. After he finishes, the girl feels very well, and starts crying with gratitude. Some time later, at night, Lucille goes to take his second daily dose of substance X. After taking it, he goes to his room, and while walking he complains a lot about the horrible taste of that. While walking through the corridor, he notices some people following him, but when he tries to talk to these people, they run away and don't say anything. The next day, he goes to talk to Broad about it, and asks what it could be. Broad responds that everyone is afraid that he will run away, and that's why they're watching him after training. They are very happy to be able to receive treatment from Lucille, and they don't want to lose that in case he gives up. Lucille, on his part, says that he gave his word that he would stay for a month, so they should trust him at least once. Some time later, a month has passed, and Lucille goes to talk to Broad. He says that now he will look for a job to pay his fees as a healer. Broad then says that if that's the case, he would pay him to continue training there for a while longer, and with that money, he could pay his fees. He says that thanks to him, many people have been saved from the brink, and he should accept it as a bonus. He also says that he's still an amateur in martial arts, and he should accept it graciously. At the end of that day, Broad presents him with a magic book, and Lucille becomes very happy, since by studying that book, he can learn more healing spells. Today's video starts with Broad giving Lucille a day off. Lucille, thinking, says he's never had a day off and doesn't know what to do with his free time. Broad asks if he'd like to go to the butcher shop to learn how to butcher some monster meat, and Lucille thinks it's a good idea. When he arrives at the designated room, he comes face to face with the butcher. The butcher, named Galba, welcomes Lucille and introduces himself as the brother of Gulgar, the guild's cook who supplies Lucille with substance X every day, despite not looking like it. They soon get to work, and the first monster is a type of boar. Galba tells Lucille to pay close attention because soon he'll be the one doing the cutting. Galba swiftly slices the boar with incredible agility, and Lucille becomes uncomfortable watching him do it. Then, Galba grabs a horned rabbit and says it's Lucille's turn. Lucille is startled but has no choice. He'll have to do it one way or another. He starts doing it as Galba instructs, feeling a bit disgusted, and he never imagined that the food he's been eating all these days is prepared this way. After he finishes the lesson, he goes to Gulgar and seems somewhat depressed. Lucille tells him that he's now much more grateful for the food he eats every day. The next day, Lucille walks through the hallway, trying to think of something to do on his second day off. While he's walking, he's grabbed by the guild girls. They take him to a room and strip him. Wait, wrong anime. They take him to a room and tell him he needs to learn about that world, but the one in charge of teaching him is only Nana Ella. The others were just teasing our young healer. Nana Ella starts teaching him about the world they're in. She shows him the map of the continent they're on and points out the city of Meritoni, which is where they are now. She explains that the Shurul Kingdom is famous for its healer guilds and is where the sacred city of Shurul is located, which is the headquarters of all the guilds. She adds that Shurul is the only place where slavery is abolished. Lucille thanks the gods for ending up there. And so, he alternates between hard training and studying with Nana Ella. He continues this routine until he realizes that half of the year has already passed. At some point, the guild girls notice that Lucille has become muscular, and his old clothes barely fit him anymore. Nana Ella decides to take him shopping for new clothes, and they do so. Lucille says he's set with his new clothes for a long time and is happy to make his first purchases in that world. However, on his way back, he hears a familiar voice screaming. Lucille doesn't think twice and runs to see what happened. When he arrives in an alley, he sees Monica, the attendant from the healing guild, lying on the ground injured and bleeding. Lucille quickly takes her to a room in the Adventurers Guild and administers first aid. Later, the girl wakes up and asks what happened. Lucille tells her that he found her unconscious in an alley in the middle of the city. Lucille asks if someone tried to harm her, and Monica says it was probably the case. She suspects she was targeted because she had recently spoken out publicly against the practices of Botticelli, the leader of the most famous healing clinic in the kingdom. Monica believes she suffered retaliation since Botticelli has been charging exorbitant fees, and if the patient can't pay, he sells them as slaves. What a scoundrel, I'm sure he's bald. Lucille tells her that she might be in danger of further attacks, so she should stay at the Adventurers Guild for a while until things calm down. Later, Monica approaches Lucille, feeling embarrassed, and thanks him for saving her life. She asks with a sad face how much she owes him for it. Lucille reassures her, saying she just needs to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and everything will be fine. Just kidding. In reality, he tells her that she has already done more than enough for him since he arrived in the city, so there's no need to repay him for the healing, leaving the girl relieved as she thought she'd go bankrupt. Some time later, Monica decides to stay permanently at the Adventurers Guild since she really likes the place. Now, we have a little time skip, and 2 months have passed. One day, Brod arrives frantically looking for Lucille. He says there are 3 adventurers about to be in dire straits, and he needs to go quickly to help them, and Lucille joins him. They rush to the scene, and Lucille sees the 3 adventurers. He decides to help Basura, who is losing a lot of blood and in critical condition. Fortunately, he manages to save Basura and moves on to the next adventurer. However, Lucille is now out of mana and feels weak. At this moment, Brod gives him a potion, and he recovers. He then proceeds to the next adventurers and fortunately manages to save the 3 who were in worse condition. Afterward, Lucille collapses from exhaustion and later wakes up. He laments not being able to save everyone and decides to study harder and train even harder out of respect for those who didn't make it. After this, we have another small time skip, and it's been a year since Lucille arrived in this new world. He talks to Brod, stating that he will find a job to pay the guild fees and thanks him for all the training, even though he still feels it wasn't enough. Then, he goes to the healing guild and speaks with Kururu, who seems quite discouraged. She asks Lucille what he wants, and he says he's there to request the renewal of his healer's license. She accepts and asks for his card, which he hands over, and she goes into a room. Some time later, she returns, desperate, and asks what he did during the past year because his stats have improved significantly. Lucille explains that he spent that time training at the Adventurers Guild to become stronger both physically and as a healer. Kururu says she understands and informs him that she can upgrade his rank from F to C. However, she mentions there are both good and bad sides to this. The good part is that he can buy new magic books to improve his skills, but the bad part is that his monthly fees will increase significantly. Lucille feels a bit depressed, saying he doesn't have much money, but Brod appears behind him and pays all the fees for him. Brod takes the opportunity to invite Lucille to stay permanently at the Adventurers Guild for training until he's ready. While he's there, Brod will pay him a fair salary, and he can continue training as usual. Later, Brod invites him to dinner. When Lucille arrives at the guild's restaurant, he finds all the adventurers waiting for him, celebrating his return. However, not everything is perfect. Lucille is presented with a gigantic dose of Substance X, and he drinks it all at once. Afterward, they all go to eat, but no one approaches Lucille because he's reeking from that dreadful drink. However, some time later, the adventurers he saved earlier come up to him. The leader of their group approaches Lucille and asks him a question in a hushed voice, inquiring if Lucille likes something between men over there. Lucille responds that he spent the last year solely focused on getting stronger in training and, furthermore, if he hits on the guild girls, Broad will cut his head off. The guys say they understand and mention that they'll take him to a house of ladies later, if you catch my drift. Lucille gets very embarrassed and asks if there are really places like that in the city. Then, Monica appears and approaches Lucille. She expresses how happy she is that he's returned, and they start talking. There's a bit of a romantic atmosphere between them, and they almost kiss but get shy and stop. The next day, while Lucille is training, an old man barges into the guild asking for him. We see that this old man is Botticelli, the leader of the largest healing clinic in the city. He confronts Lucille and angrily questions what on earth he's doing because, thanks to him, the old man's business has taken a hit since fewer people are seeking his services. Take a look at the old man, didn't I tell you he was bald? The old man insists that Lucille should go to his clinic and work there, almost ordering the boy to do so. However, Lucille refuses, and the old man becomes furious. The old man then claims it's an official order out of pity, but Lucille questions what kind of pity involves him giving up his job. The old man, still seething with anger, says that since Lucille came to the city, the number of patients seeking his clinic has plummeted, and he must pay for it. The old man is fuming, but Broad arrives at that very moment and threatens to personally inspect his clinic if they don't leave. The old man becomes very afraid and hurries away. Then, Broad tells Lucille that more people may come after him on behalf of Botticelli, and he must prepare for real combat. He emphasizes that from now on, it won't just be training, it will be a real fight, and he hands Lucille a shield and a sword. Lucille continues his training, working hard day after day, alternating between sword, spear, and bow and arrow, all while studying magic to learn new healing abilities. Afterward, we see Botticelli, and he appears quite pleased. We can see that he's sending some kind of letter, requesting that the high-ranking members of the healing guilds send Lucille to a guild far away from this location, with Lucille commenting that it's been 6 months since that incident with Botticelli, and he continues to train hard and eat like an animal. While he eats, Broad comments that he's ripped. Golga says that nobody would think he's a healer when he walks through the streets. This is because healers aren't used to training for battle, which leaves their bodies weak. Lucille agrees and also mentions that he's starting to lose his fear of blades since he gets cut almost every day during his training. Broad says that's how it is. If he keeps trying to surprise him, he'll get cut from time to time. That's some Spartan training right there. Golga, upon hearing this conversation, is totally shocked. Lucille concludes by saying that thanks to this, he has confidence that he can protect his life. Then, Nanila calls Lucille and tells him she has a letter for him. Upon receiving the letter, he sees that it was sent from the Holy Church of Shurul. As he reads it, Lucille realizes that they are requesting his transfer to the headquarters of the Healers Guilds. Broad, upon seeing this, begins to suspect that Botticelli might be behind all of this. Broad mentions that they still have half a year until Lucille's transfer, so they should intensify his training even more. In addition to Spartan training, Lucille will now learn to fight in real combat. Lucille is initially excited, but after the first training session, he becomes completely exhausted. A girl comes to talk to him and asks if he won't be treating anyone anymore. Lucille responds that he's completely out of mana. At that moment, Golga enters with a gigantic cup of Substance X and tells Lucille to drink it to regain his strength and mana. Lucille drinks it and quickly feels better. Afterward, Broad and Golga have a conversation at the guild counter. Golga asks him how long he's been so young and ripped. Broad says he's surprised too and explains that it's all due to Lucille's intense training. He mentions that by training him, his martial arts have risen to level 7. Golga is surprised and says that the man known as the Tornado, with S-rank martial arts, has become even stronger. He also says that if he had waited a bit longer to retire, he might have reached SS rank. This reveals that Broad is really tough, as we already suspected from his incredible strength, but now we have a better understanding of who he is. After that, Golga starts talking about Lucille. He mentions that the boy drinks that Substance X all the time, but even he doesn't know the effects of that dreadful drink. Broad only says that ancient texts mention that it makes the body stronger, but there's no real evidence of its true effects. Golga says that if that's the case, it's too late to tell him now, so it's better to keep it a secret. Golga also mentions that it's impressive that he drinks that stuff every day because it gives Lucille a terrible breath afterward. Even his friends distance themselves from him when he consumes that creepy drink. After that, Galba, Golga's brother, arrives and says he went to Shurul to make some negotiations to ensure Luciel doesn't become a target when he arrives in the city. He also confirms that Botticelli is behind this sudden transfer. Golga also suggests that, in his opinion, a lot of money is going to Botticelli's clinic, and it's time for someone to put an end to it, implying that he might do it himself. Here, we discover that before becoming a guild butcher, Galba was a famous assassin. Afterward, they discuss Luciel. Broad mentions that he's still in Class 1, and at his current level, he can fight against adventurers or soldiers of rank E, and maybe with some tricks, he can handle some rank C opponents. He says Luciel has a lot of room for improvement. Broad asks if Galba would like to train him, but Galba says that if Luciel doesn't change in a few years, maybe he'll consider it. Then, Golga changes the subject, mentioning that it's the age for Luciel to pursue some romantic interests. Broad comments that all the girls in the guild like him, but it's likely they just see him as a little brother. He mentions that Luciel is tall and handsome, but because of his tough training, he's seen as a masochistic zombie, and that might make them not interested in him romantically. Galba mentions that during one of his butchery classes for Luciel, he asked him what type of girl he likes. On that occasion, Luciel said he would like a beautiful and sweet girl, and they realize they need to help him. Here we have a time skip, and half a year has passed. Finally, the day for Luciel to depart has come. He talks to Broad and says that he really has to go since a healer ignoring the Pope's orders is something extremely absurd, and they might send people after him. Broad, in turn, says that if the headquarters is corrupt, he should find a way to escape and come back to the guild. He asks Luciel why he called him there. Luciel says he has a favor to ask, and it's later revealed that he asked to go to the guild cemetery. There, some adventurers who Luciel couldn't save were buried. He says he saved as many people as he could, but unfortunately, there were some he couldn't help. He thinks that in his absence, clinics like Botticelli's will continue to charge exorbitant prices as they always have. The new adventurers are poor, so they will certainly take on dangerous missions to earn money. Even minor injuries, when not treated immediately, can be fatal. And he knows that even if the clinics treat them, since they can't pay, they are sold as slaves to other countries. Luciel says he wants to prevent all of this, and thinking about it all, he makes a request to Broad. He asks him to start a training course for the newcomers. This way, they would become stronger, learn how to carve monster meat, identify medicinal herbs, and many other skills that would help them in their survival. By doing this, they could reduce the number of people who would need to pay fortunes for treatment in abusive clinics like Botticelli's. Broad asks Luciel why he's making this request since adventurers are the masters of their own lives. Luciel says it's because he had a mentor like Broad that he became stronger. And this way, if adventurers become stronger and more knowledgeable, their survival rate will remain high, similar to when Luciel was there treating them every day. Broad finds it funny since he's a healer and wants to cause problems for the clinics. Luciel says yes, but above all, his heart is that of an adventurer. He says that all the adventurers he's met are good people, and that's why he wants Broad to create a system for adventurers to succeed. Broad then asks if Luciel feels that he has grown while training with him. The boy responds that he still lacks many skills, and he is quite clumsy, but mentally, he feels he has grown a lot. He says he's happy to have Broad as his mentor. Broad smiles and asks him if he really thinks the training is over after only 2 years. And Luciel says, obviously not, since he hasn't even managed to land a single hit on Broad. Broad says it's okay, he will consider opening this course. And then, he asks about Monica, since it was Luciel who brought her to the guild, and he doesn't know if she will want to stay there when he leaves. Luciel replies that considering her safety, the Adventurers Guild is the best place for her to live. Furthermore, she really likes everyone there and is very happy in that place. Shortly thereafter, Broad says they should go as it's time for him to pack. He also shouts at the 2 girls who were hiding behind them to leave as well. Luciel is surprised to see them there and doesn't understand what's going on. Soon, the 2 girls come to talk to him. Luciel thanks them both for taking care of him all this time. Nanila says Luciel is an example and an inspiration to everyone and shouldn't thank them. Monica says he saved her life, so she should be the one thanking him. Luciel again praises Nanila for always taking care of him and washing his clothes. He says she means a lot to him. As for Monica, he says that because she was there for him every day, he didn't give up, and when he says this, he leaves both of them very embarrassed, and Monica even cries with emotion. Luciel says he will be leaving tomorrow, and he honestly doesn't know what will happen after that. but he says that someday, he will come back to have dinner with them. Well, the guy is ambitious, wanting both of them, and there are people out there who don't even have one. Complicated, right? Naturally, they accept. And right after that, they go to the guild. Lucio receives his adventurer card and realizes that he has reached rank E. Then he turns to Broad and promises that one day he will land a hit on him, and he should be prepared for that. Broad says that if he manages that, he will do anything Lucio asks. Look out, that's a complicated promise. Well, as I said, Lucio says that if that's the case, he will make Broad drink 5 mugs of Substance X. And Broad gets nervous. Then, an adventurer calls for Lucio and informs him that his bags are already in the carry. Lucio then thanks everyone and says his goodbyes. Broad speaks on behalf of everyone, saying that he was really great, and thanks to him, many lives were saved, and dreams were not destroyed. After that, he gives Lucio a present. A magic bag that can hold 10 items and some money to help him on his new journey. Lucio thanks him and starts crying with emotion. After that, he goes to the carriage outside the city. Upon arriving there, he realizes that the White Wolf team will be traveling with him, and he is very happy to travel with people he already knows. It begins with Lucio on his journey to the city of Shurul, where he was transferred due to Botticulli's, that bald chubby guy's, fault. Just like we saw in the last video, he's traveling with some adventurer friends who are providing escort. As he approaches the city, Lucio is greatly impressed by its size. Before going to the church, he decides to stop by the Adventurers Guild first to buy some of that X substance, that awful and stinky drink that aids in physical and magical growth. But he mentions that he's afraid of getting into trouble at the guild, just like when he joined the Adventurers Guild at the beginning of the anime. Seeing this, Bazan, one of the adventurers with him, decides to accompany him to avoid any problems. Upon arrival, Lucio notices that the Adventurers Guild is exactly like the guild in the other city they were in and is amazed by it all. Bazan calls Lucio to come with him, and they approach a girl. Bazan tells her that he's here to introduce Lucio to the guild master, and she instructs them to wait and says she'll go get him. When the girl leaves, Bazan warns Lucio not to be fooled. Even though she seems cute and polite, she's easily stronger than Bazan himself. Afterward, the guild master arrives, and we see that he's a dwarf. No, I'm not joking, he's literally a dwarf. Bazan quickly introduces Lucio, and he mentions that he's a healer. When he says this, everyone is obviously shocked, just like in the other city, as healers don't have a good reputation. Lucio gets a bit nervous, but the guild master quickly recognizes him since he's famous for being the masochistic zombie who trains with his brothers. Look at the reputation this guy gained, man. After that, the guild master asks him what he wants. At this moment, Bazan leaves, and Lucio makes his request. He says he wants a barrel of X substance. Again, everyone is surprised, and the girl asks him to repeat to make sure she didn't hear it wrong. This time, he says he wants 3 barrels of X substance. People start gossiping about this mysterious substance, calling him crazy. After making this request, the guild master brings him a glass of X substance to drink, saying he can't sell it to those who can't handle it. Lucio accepts and quickly downs the glass of that strange drink. The adventurers present comment that he's a monster for being able to drink it. Lucio thanks them for the drink and proceeds to buy his barrels. After that, the guild master asks if it's true that he treats people for just 1 silver coin, and he confirms it. He explains that as long as no one causes trouble for him, he can do it without any issue. After that, he goes to the church and notices that it's gigantic. Here, he says his goodbyes to the White Wolf group and thanks them. They, in turn, say it's a pleasure to protect the man who saved their lives. Lucio gets emotional and says he'll miss them. Thinking, he says he'll work hard to repay the kindness everyone has shown him since he arrived in that world, and then heads to the church. Upon entering, he's impressed by the size of it all and soon talks to the receptionists. They tell him that this is the headquarters of the Healers Guild and ask what he wants. Lucio introduces himself and explains that he was transferred there. They instruct him to wait and soon call someone in charge to show him around the guild and explain his duties. The guy arrives, and we see that he's quite grumpy. He introduces himself as Granhart, a priest from the guild. After that, he instructs Lucille to follow him, and they open a magical elevator that they use to go up to the other floors. Upstairs, Lucille encounters Lumina, the paladin who helped him back in the first episode. She comes to talk to him and expresses surprise at seeing him there. However, she gets his name wrong, which shakes Lucille a bit. Again, he thanks her for the help she gave him in Maritoni. She says there's no need and adds that she saw his potential from the beginning because his aura was pure and crystalline. She says she wants to talk to him, but she can do that later since he's busy with Granhart. After that, they proceed and enter a weird room that looks almost like a torture chamber. But Granhart says it's just a storage room, and he shouldn't worry. A storage room, huh, sure. After that, they sit down at a table to talk to Granhart. He hands Lucille a letter he received from a healing clinic in Maritoni, the city Lucille was in. The letter accuses him of offering treatments that harm the businesses of other healers. Granhart wants to know the truth about this. Lucille then gets motivated and starts telling the whole truth. He admits that he disrupted Botticelli's business, but not out of malice. He explains that the healers there charged exorbitant prices for even simple treatments. That's why he started charging fair prices, which significantly improved the survival rate of adventurers there. After this explanation, Granhart says he will discuss it with the other priests and the archbishop. Lucille thanks him and asks what he will do at the guild. Granhart then begins to explain to him what his job will be. Apparently, he will be responsible for exorcising demons in the underground labyrinth of the church. He mentions that his salary will be 20 gold coins per month, which completely shocks Lucille. Granhart says he will start tomorrow, so he should get some rest early tonight. After that, he goes to talk to Lumina. He explains to her the reasons for his presence there, and she seems to understand. Lucille tells Lumina about the job he will be doing there, and she worries since he might be in danger exorcising undead creatures. Lucille asks what kind of monsters are in the labyrinth, and Lumina answers that there are zombies, skeletons, and ghosts. She adds that they can be defeated with purification spells or sacred swords. Lucille asks if there's anything good about this job, and Lumina informs him that besides the high salary, he can keep everything he finds in the labyrinth, including treasures and artifacts. She also mentions that it's not all fun and games because the labyrinth is a really smelly place, and the stench sticks to your clothes, so people will give him dirty looks when he passes by. Lucille, thinking, says it's not a problem since all of this happens with the X substance he takes every day. After that, they bid farewell, and Lucille thanks her for the explanations. The next day, Lucille talks to Jord, a blonde guy who also works in the same area as him and will show him how his new job works. Then, Granhart gives him his work clothes and the card to use the magical elevator to enter and leave the guild. After that, he leaves Lucille in Jord's care and departs. Lucille and Jord head to the labyrinth. Upon entering, Lucille notices that the smell is indeed terrible, but it's less awful than the X substance. As they enter, they encounter the first zombie. Jord quickly shows Lucille how to defeat them. He uses a purification spell to exorcise it. When the zombie is exorcised, a magic stone falls, and he tells Lucille to collect them because they will be converted into points for him to buy things at the guild's shop. After that, Jord, satisfied that everything is explained, leaves, and now it's just Lucille and the gods. He continues forward, mapping the area to avoid getting lost. At some point, Lucille finds himself facing a horde of zombies and panics. In one way or another, he manages to recite the spell and exorcise all the zombies. After defeating them, Lucille imagines that his level must have gone up, but to his complete disappointment, nothing has changed. He's still level 1. But he decides not to get frustrated, since he will earn 20 gold coins per month, and he can keep everything he finds, in addition to training his healing abilities. So if he levels up, it's a bonus, but if not, it's still good. But he notices that if he keeps using the purifying spell all the time, he will eventually run out of mana, and that will really be a problem. Because without mana, he won't be able to like and subscribe here on the channel. So, make use of your mana and go ahead and subscribe now. Actually, this will be a problem in that place full of monsters. Lucille has an idea. He decides to infuse the purification spell into his sword. This way, he casts the spell only once and uses almost no mana but achieves the same result, spending only a fraction of the mana that would be used when casting the spell. Then he continues slaying zombies and completes the first level of the labyrinth. He decides to descend to the second level and soon encounters a new monster, a type of ghost that is easily defeated by the sword with holy spells. Afterwards, he feels hungry and decides to eat a sandwich, along with a drink to accompany. Nothing better than the good and horrifying substance X, right? Lucille says thanks to it, even monsters don't come near. Even monsters can't stand the smell of that stuff, man. After that, the first horde of skeletons appears, and Lucille desperately defeats them. And so he decides to call it a day. As he leaves, he goes to talk to JRD. Right away, the blonde guy casts a purification spell on Lucille's face to see if he had turned into a zombie. Then, he takes Lucille to the guild's shop, where he can exchange his magic stones for items such as spell books, swords, lances, and other things. Upon entering, he is impressed and says it looks like a game. After that, a girl appears and introduces herself. Her name is Katlia, and she sort of runs that store. She doesn't beat around the bush and quickly tells him to hand over the stones he collected during his exorcisms. Lucille gives them to her, and she says that it adds up to more than 4,000 points. JRD is very impressed, as this is his first day there. Then, the girl asks if there's something there that he wants to buy. Lucille looks at the books, and she says the most expensive one costs 1 million points, which is obviously out of his budget. He then asks about the prices of the swords and lances. She says they're made of holy silver and specially crafted to fight undead creatures. She mentions that each one costs 2,500 points, and Lucille asks why they are so cheap. She says that in the church, few healers use swords and physical weapons. Most prefer staves and other magical weapons, so few people buy them, making weapons like these very cheap due to low demand. Lucille gets excited and says he'll buy a sword and a lance tomorrow since he doesn't have enough money for both now. However, Katlia says he can take both for 4,000 points since it's his first day. Lucille is really happy and then walks away from the shop, happily. But soon he runs into Granhart, who comes to talk to him. He asks how things are going, and Lucille says everything is fine so far. The man says that his salary will be paid at the beginning of each month and begins to give him a lot of instructions on what he needs to do. And in the end, he hands Lucille a new set of clothes, the same kind that all healers wear inside the church. After that, Lucille returns to the labyrinth, deciding to test his new weapons. He continues to defeat monsters until he finds a trap that nearly hits him. He decides to mark everything on his map and continues to slay various zombies. At some point, he finds a strange door and thinks it might be the boss room. He decides not to enter and goes to inquire about it to be prepared. The next day, he says he's ready and decides to go inside. Upon entering, a large number of zombies, skeletons, and ghosts appear. Lucille tries to use spells to fight them. However, he notices that nothing works there, and he realizes that he'll have to handle everything manually. And so he does. He continues to beat all the monsters until none remain. Well, that's what he thought. After defeating all of them, a kind of boss appears. Lucille tries to fight it using his bow and arrow, but the big skeleton easily dodges all his attacks. Lucille then notices that it's afraid of holy weapons, so it dodges them. He then comes up with a plan to try to defeat the huge skeleton. The monster then raises its cosmos like Seiya, and Lucille charges towards it. He shoots some arrows at the flying big skeleton and advances towards it. Then he draws his sword and cuts the thing's head, but it's not nearly enough to beat the big monster. Lucille then grabs his lance and throws it at the big monster. Then he swings his sword, and that's how he manages to defeat it. After that, he notices that he can use his powers again and quickly heals himself. Afterward, he collects all the magic stones and items left by the monsters. Then, a kind of secret passage is revealed. However, we'll only find out what's inside later. Lucille decides to go back and eat since he's starving. He goes to Katlia, hands over everything he got today, and says that after the stones, he wants to show her something. She looks at the stones and sees a huge one among the normal ones, asking what it is. He says that on the 10th floor, there was a huge monster horde, and in the final room, there was a much stronger monster, like a boss. And this stone came from it after being defeated. The woman is very impressed to hear that he made it to the 10th floor in his first days in the labyrinth. Lucille continues to explain, saying that he couldn't use magic inside, so he had to solve everything with physical combat. The woman is upset that he's being so imprudent and gives Lucille a stern talk, who quietly agrees to be more careful. She understands him and apologizes for getting irritated. Then she says she'll exchange his magic stones for points. She returns and says that it all adds up to almost 110,000 points, and Lucille is totally shocked by such a large amount. Then, she says that he mentioned he wanted to show her something, and he takes out the things he wants to show, there. When he shows the clothes and staff he got from the boss, the girl is completely astonished. She immediately tells him to put everything in the bag and follow her. They go to the Pope, and Catlia introduces Lucille to her. She says he's a new healer in the guild and that he's been exorcising monsters in the labyrinth. She also mentions that since he took the job, he has eliminated a very large number of undead creatures in the labyrinth. But the Pope says that must not be all because she went there to speak with her. Catlia says that today he fought a very strong phantom on the 10th floor, and after defeating it, it left some very interesting items, so she would like to show them to the Pope to see what she thinks. Seeing what it is, the Pope is impressed and says she wants to buy them from him. Lucille then decides to use his sales techniques and negotiate with her. He says that his magic bag doesn't hold much, and he would like to receive a better one in exchange for those items he got. The Pope agrees and asks if that's all he wants, and he confirms. Finally, the Pope says that if he finds more interesting things, he should bring them to her, and she will negotiate with him. Catlia is impressed that he negotiated with the Pope, saying that most people wouldn't dare to do that. And that's how today's video ends. Did you like it? Then, my dear otaku, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more of my videos, my friend. Also, leave a like, it really helps me out. And for those of you who are real fans and always watch until the end of the videos, I've left an amazing anime here on the final screen. It tells the story of Haruto, a boy who was discarded and reincarnated into a world of fantasy and magic. He was incredibly lucky to be born into the royal family, but his parents thought he was a weakling and abandoned him in the forest. Check it out, it's amazing, okay? Until next time, bye.